Hello, I hope you are all well today. Thank you for joining me, and it's good to be back. And I can't believe that I'm back at the end of a month of studying Swahili. It's been a really fast month's worth of study. In fact, to the point that I was ready to have my lesson again today with my teacher and realized that we'd actually had 4 weeks, a month's worth of classes already. And I hadn't scheduled or agreed with any other classes, but I was ready to have my next class. I actually enjoyed learning Swahili that much. And many of you have written to me and said, what are you going to do with Swahili now? What was the point of learning Swahili? Why are you doing it? What's the goal? The goal for me predominantly was to spend a month of my time during the break from my normal studies to, like I did with Estonian, to see how far I could get with a language on a language app that's used to really test it out. And obviously that language app was Duolingo, and I decided I would do a similar thing by using a teacher so that I could actually see where I was getting with it and how I felt with the language, and also to provide now lessons. So I now have a set of 8 lessons of Swahili that any of you can follow at any time, and you can follow along on Duolingo, and you can watch the lessons, and you'll hopefully get something additional or something extra to be able to learn some Swahili yourselves. And the amount that I've learned, I'm not making huge conversations in Swahili. After a month of studying Swahili every day for about an hour or so a day, I am approaching an A1.1 level. So that's the very first half of the A1 level, just to give you an idea. Probably covered a few hundred words and maybe a little bit more in Swahili, and looked at some of the grammar. But this is the beginning stages of the language. This is not the. I'm saying you can't hear me. Hopefully that's it. Can everybody else hear me okay? I just want to check. Please do let me know if you can hear me okay, so that I know we're all okay. The very thank you. So the interesting thing with studying a language, and I think we see this when online, where people say, "Oh, I've studied a language and I've done it for a week and I speak it." I'm going to be honest with you. No, I don't speak Swahili. It's not a language I would claim to speak. It's a language that I have now studied something of. I have an idea of something of how the verbs work and how the noun classes work to a degree. I haven't mastered them, but I have studied some Swahili. I know some basic words. I could put some basic sentences together. I can say some basic things in Swahili. I've done the days of the week, the months of the year, the numbers, time, talking about my family a little bit, talking about what I like, what I don't like, what I can do, what I can't do, talking about sort of some daily routines, stuff like that. I can do in Swahili. But this is what you do at the start of A1. Okay, this is A1.1. And there's quite a long way to go to get to full A1 level in a language. So I kind of want to really highlight this, because I do sometimes think that we can have a tendency to think that we're A1 after a week of study, and it devalues the amount of study and work that goes into an A1 level. Just to give you sort of another example with Cornish, I myself thought I was kind of like it's A1, A2-ish level in Cornish after a year of studying it regularly. Probably around about an A2-ish level in Cornish after now a year and a half or so. And this is taking it slowly. Okay, this isn't me doing a very intensive study of the language, but it takes time to reach these levels, to be actively able to speak them. Maybe understanding them can be a little bit more quickly, but to actually get to a level where you feel you can speak and you really do know the language to an A1 level properly, takes longer. Of course, if you're learning a language that's very similar to a language you speak, your understanding could actually be very, very quick in terms of how well you understand the language. To give you another example, I studied Czech at university in Prague, and later I did a language challenge to learn Slovak. And very, very quickly, I could watch news reports in Slovak. I could even watch a comedy that I liked called Panelák, which is the type of place where people live, or the old apartments people used to live in Czechoslovakia, when it was Czechoslovakia. And so for that language, of course, my understanding of Slovak was probably very, very quickly kind of this sort of B-ish level, because a lot of words and a lot of things in the grammar were very similar to Czech. But that didn't mean I could produce the language to the same level accurately. It would be a kind of a Czechified version or something like that. And this is, for a language like Swahili, even more obvious, because it's a very different language, a very new language for what was for me. I'd never studied a Bantu language before. Yes, I got some help with some of the loanwords from Arabic that I knew from some of my studies of Arabic, but also my studies of Turkish and some Indonesian and obviously Macedonian, where we have a lot of these Turkish words that originally came from Arabic, and some Persian words as well that came through Turkish into other languages in the Balkans, but then also from Arabic, particularly with sort of with religion, with Islam that went to Indonesia. You see these words crop up all over the world, and so that helps me to understand things. So, when I hear the word in Swahili, tafadhali, it's not particularly a difficult word for me to remember, because and that means please, because I know min fadlak in Arabic, please. I know these. I know these words because of studies of other languages, but most of the words in Swahili are Bantu words, so I don't know necessarily. Mwanafunzi is the word for a student, and I didn't know that word at all. I had to remember it. Other words, there are lots and lots of basic words, and many words in Swahili that are not these types of words, but having some of these loan words can help make you feel a bit more confident in the beginning. It's also one of the reasons why you see a system like Michael Thomas, where the actual way of teaching focuses very much on the words we have in common. So if you take a Michael Thomas course, one of the first words you'll learn in Japanese with Michael Thomas is aisukrimu. Aisukrimu is Japanese for ice cream, of course, which you can hear. And you learn that you say aisukrimu o kudasai. I would like an ice cream. And you learn basically that you just had this little bit of a trickier, different way of saying o kudasai, which is the particle o, and then kudasai, which is like I want or I'd like. And then you add whatever you want. So you can say aisukrimu o kudasai. Biru, if you like beer, biru o kudasai. And you do this is a kind of the way of learning it, because you focus on words that you know already. And they do it with Arabic as well. Like Arabic, of course, uses the word pizza, which of course is not an original Arabic word, but it's a word that you get and understand quite quickly. And so on and so forth. This is kind of how it works. And if you look at the Romance languages, it's you're focusing on the words that are the same or similar. You just have small changes in pronunciation, and all of a sudden you've gone from information to information, or información, or informação, or whatever else, informazioni, informazioni. You can then just extrapolate lots and lots of words and vocabulary from just knowing a few things that are in common. And so this has kind of been my exciting thing about doing seeing the bits of language that I could recognize from Swahili, but it also was a kind of a sobering experience, in that I had to recognize that actually at the end of a month of study every single day, I am approaching kind of an A1.1, no more. Okay, so I have not studied Swahili for a month and speak Swahili. I feel quite confident in what I know because I've been practicing it twice a week with my teacher for a month, and I've really enjoyed it. My experience with Duolingo has been kind of a bit mixed. Um, it's generally I've liked it in terms of I've enjoyed having words that I've seen with my teacher that I then have gone on to learn. I've been trying to sort of perfect these this tree, so making them all purple so that I definitely know the words, and I find that really helps to cement the words in my vocabulary. Um, but what I do find is it goes very, very slowly. The other thing I've noticed with Duolingo, I think that can be a bit of a trap for anybody who gets too much into these league tables, and which, I mean, I get why they're there, but what you could end up doing is getting more focused on the game than on the actual learning. And I think I have noticed on occasion where um, just to get through something, you're going quite quickly and you're sort of learning by heart and not really spending the time to consider it as much. Sometimes it feels a bit that way, and so generally I'm fairly positive about it, but definitely an hour of my time spending on Duolingo could possibly have been better spent actually studying with a book, with a course, and going through it. I think I would have possibly made more progress. I definitely would have understood the theory around the language better because I would have had more uh, explanations of how the language was working. I may have seen other vocabulary that I could have taken on board. But generally speaking, I've not found the vocabulary too crazy. In the very first time I tried Duolingo was many, many years ago when it first came out. And I found that learning the word for owl very quickly was a very strange thing to do, just because an owl happens to be the sort of the duo owl happens to be the logo for the sort of the mascot for the company. I found it was an odd word to learn, and I remember I tried out the Turkish one many many years ago, and I heard the word baykush, and I was like, what? Why am I learning baykush now? I mean, I know the word baykush anyway because Turkish is a word spoken in this area, but felt like an odd word to learn. Kush is fine because kush is, and actually it's an easy word in Turkish, to be fair, because bay is the word that you'd use for it, like to an old word that you'd use anywhere on the Balkans. In fact, you can hear it in Bulgaria, where it's kind of like to a Mr. Sir, for example, as a title. And then kush is generally a bird. So basically, it's kind of like a Mr. Bird or Sir Bird is an owl, which is quite a funny thing. Yeah, by man, but like a sir, it's more like a by as in a term that you'd use to address someone. So I could be by Richard, for example, by Richard, if someone were to address me by. Um, and anyway, so so some of these words from Duolingo I've found to be odd. Some of the ones that I've particularly found odd to learn right now are ones that I've mentioned possibly in other lives. Um, One was indo, which is the word for a bucket, which I think is very odd for me to learn at this stage, as one of the first words I learn in Swahili. Um, Mche is a word for a sapling or a seedling, which again is a very odd word for me to know at the moment. Um, Another word that I learnt was, I can't even remember it now because it's that odd and strange. And it was the word for insecticide, and I just found it a very bizarre word to be teaching me at this stage in my learning. Why I need to know the word for insecticide in Swahili, I will never know. But if you don't memorize these and learn them, you can't move on to the next stages. And this is one of the weaknesses I find with Duolingo. I think if I were to do this app, I would definitely have an option where you could say, actually, take out this word. I find that the word is so useless to me that I would like to put an X by it, and maybe they put it in at a different stage in the learning, or it completely gets eradicated from your learning tree. I don't know if there's even options in terms of creating software to do that, but if anybody is thinking of doing anything similar to Duolingo, or if Duolingo can actually change that, I would say add in an X this word option so that you can move through the tree and have more sensible word choices for learning. So that's kind of my thought on it. I have found it to generally to be useful. I've picked up vocabulary before my lessons and then seen them in my lessons. So you'll have seen with the one lesson with Glory, I'd come across the word for to play, and so I've seen how you could kind of go from the verb to play and how you then conjugate it. I went through a lot more conjugations with Glory of verbs in different tenses than I have done on Duo. So there are some parts of the tree here where it talks about the future tense, and I already know that because of my lessons with Glory. In fact, with a language like Duolingo, with a language like Swahili, in certain aspects, it does make sense to understand the complexity of the verb, or how you can switch from past, present, future, or preterite very, very easily and quickly. So I would potentially even have that in a different order, and I wouldn't necessarily wait so long to be introduced to it, because you can start playing with it quite quickly. It's not that challenging to know that you use that. Some of the negation is a bit challenging in Swahili with the different tenses, but otherwise, generally speaking, it's that's not the hard thing about Swahili. Understanding where the noun classes come in and how they change is not the most straightforward thing, and that's not really very obvious on Duolingo, and I didn't really feel like it kept jumping backwards and forwards with the examples. So yeah, generally speaking, I'm going to give it a thumbs up, um, but I'm going to say it's fun. Take it for what it is. If you find you're on it so much that it becomes more for the game, be very aware of that, that you're using it as a game. Um, and yeah, I mean that's kind of where I landed with Duo. I think by the end of this month. Now the question about where I'm gonna go with Swahili, I always find this particularly difficult because my natural instinct is I want to carry on. In fact, today I messaged my teacher at the time we normally have our lessons and said, are you ready for your lesson? Are you ready for the lesson today? And she was like, I didn't realize we were having one because it's like been a month and we only agreed for the month. And I completely forgot that I hadn't, I'd got to the end of the month. I enjoyed it that much. So first of all, I enjoyed working with Glory because she's just a lovely, lovely person. And thank you, Glory. Asante sana. It was a really nice experience. The thing with now, what do I do is that I start my other courses back. I start my other groups. My learning starts again. I've been focusing on Celtic languages for a while now. Again, I've enjoyed going back to them. It's kind of my heritage, my roots, and there's something quite cathartic about going back to sort of indigenous languages of where you're from and exploring them or re-exploring them sometimes. And so I've actually really enjoyed doing that, and want to continue doing it. That said, there are other languages that I had started, and Estonian's one, and I don't really want to lose my Estonian completely, so I would like to carry on with Estonian. I have done some Maori, and I would like to review my Maori and get back to it. I also have a number of other languages that I've kind of taken to this sort of A1, A2 level, where I think it'd be good to go back to them. Indonesian's one which I absolutely adore. I adore Indonesian. And Swahili will be one of these languages that I would love to take further. I will see. I'm going to talk and and see what I can do. So if I can fit in Swahili in my time, I will definitely continue using the Duolingo tree to go through. I might not use it as intensively, like an hour a day or more, because I don't necessarily have that amount of time, but I will continue to go through some Duolingo just because I want to see how far I get in the end to be able to give you a conclusion of the entire course. And the Duolingo tree for Swahili is actually only 3 checkpoints. So, I mean, in a few months, I think I should be able to finish it. it going down to a sort of a more reasonable rate of study. So I will go through it. I will try and finish Swahili on this as kind of a fun thing, but it won't be with the same intensity. And I will also look at which other languages I take on, or I may well do another one of these kinds of challenges. I've really enjoyed doing it. I've had some very nice offers from people to teach me their languages, and I'm absolutely blown away when somebody gives me that kind of honor of, I would love to teach you my language. For me, that is just one of the kindest things you can say to me. And it's also one of the things that sort of excites me the most, of somebody who really wants me to learn the language. I really, really like that. There's nothing nicer than that idea for me. And so there have been a couple of offers like that in that I will also be considering. And yeah, I will see where I go. Of course, I am only human, and I only have so many hours in my day, and I also do need to work, and I have a family, and I have the languages that I'm studying already. That I'm preparing my second exam for Cornish. I'll be finishing that, and I've got 2 more levels of Cornish after that for exams that I can pass. So I'm doing level 2 at the moment for Cornish, grade 2, and I will then carry on and do grade 3 and then do grade 4. Grade 4 I think takes 2 years, so I've got maybe 3 more years of Cornish studies ahead of me after this. So we will see where I get. But these were my languages for my retirement to the Celtic languages, but COVID brought them forward, and I'm going to change things around. My plan was to do more Asian languages actually now, but because there are so many materials for Asian languages and so many opportunities to use them online, I felt that I would prioritize the Celtic languages that have really grown in opportunities to study them, and I'd like to be able to support, hopefully being part of a group or a class that class continues for more years. And if I didn't do that now, I wouldn't be supporting those groups in the same way. Whereas I think many of the Asian languages I was looking at and studying, like Korean, there are lots of groups already, there are lots of places to study, and there are lots of materials. So yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment. So I hope I've answered all those questions. I'm going to have a look at the questions that have come in now. So thank you so much for your patience and for listening to me, and for the questions you've got as well. Cześć, hello, nice to see you. Yeah, okay, you're on. Okay, cool, Irene, that you're on lesson 1 of Swahili. It's there. It's going to stay there. These lessons are free of charge. They're there for you to sort of to go on and to use as you want. So yeah. Carlos, sorry, just greetings from New York. Greetings back to you too. I was wondering if there could be a cultural insight you've learnt so far via the Swahili language. Cultural insight, that's a good question. I've not had enough experience speaking it to enough people to be able to truly give a cultural insight. It's my experience generally has been very, very positive. I have spent time in Africa, not a huge amount of time, but I've spent time in Africa. I spent 6 weeks in Southern Africa. So South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia, and they're the countries I've visited in Southern Africa. I've actually not been to a country where they speak Swahili, although I have met Swahili speakers, and so my experience with talking to Glory, there were definitely some parallels that I could draw from my interactions with people in other African countries that are not a million miles away from Tanzania, let's be honest. And some of those experiences, yeah, I mean, very kind, very open, very, very nice people that I've spoken to. I mean, of the trip that I had, I really loved spending time in Botswana. I just found the people to be absolutely wonderful, so kind and so friendly, and so welcoming. I mean, that's the same for all of the countries I was in Africa. Actually, they were all very, very nice to me. But Botswana, particularly, I just loved Botswana. I could spend many months or even years in Botswana and never grow sick of it. I just thought that the people were wonderful. So yeah, I mean, it kind of, speaking to Gloria, I guess, ignited those memories and how much I loved spending time in Africa, and how much I'd love to explore more of Africa, but not just kind of as a tourist, but also, like you say, getting to know the cultures a bit better. There are many cultures and many languages in in that part of the world, and it's amazing. You scratch the surface with a month's worth of study of Swahili. Is really, it's just like a pinprick of experience. It's so small, so I wouldn't want to comment too far on that until I've had way more experience. And I mean, my experience of cultures really is Europe and Asia. Yeah, but that's kind of in terms of my intimate experiences, growing up with family in Thailand, and also in having lived in many European countries. But otherwise, yeah, that they're my experiences generally. And so Africa's it's a really new part of the world. Yeah, so there we go. Hopefully I'll get more. I'll be able to say more. I do love the crossovers though, and yeah. Okay. Konbanwa, Chanel. Nice to see you. Genki desu ka? Richard, do you speak Turkish? I do speak Turkish. It's a language that we speak here in the Balkans. So it's spoken by quite a lot of people, and we have a lot of Turkish words. So my home language is Macedonian, and we have over 6,000 Turkish words in Macedonian. So we have quite a lot of Turkish vocabulary and influence. And it's even influenced parts of the grammar as well of the language. So I have that as a basis anyway, but I also went to the Yunus Emre Institute and I studied Turkish intensively for a couple of years. I studied it up to, I finished the B1 level course and passed that, and I've started B2 a couple of times, but there were never enough people on the courses to carry on. So it's tended to be a language that I've got to a point where I'm happy to communicate in Turkish. It's not perfect, but it's functional, and then yeah, I use it when I can in the city with Turkish speakers. If people are Turkish speakers from the Balkans, then they tend to speak the other Balkan languages as well, but they enjoy speaking Turkish to people who have learned. If they're from Turkey, they tend not to speak another language. They tend to only speak Turkish. So I've had many encounters where if I didn't speak Turkish, I wouldn't be communicating with that person. And that happens a lot. People who have come from Turkey and set up businesses in parts of the Balkans, for example, people who are visiting, people who have even married into society and don't speak the local languages, they only speak Turkish. So I've had many experiences like that with Turkish. And so yeah, but I mean, it's not one of my best languages, but it's also not one of my very worst. My understanding's fairly okay, and yeah, as I say, I've passed the B1 exam, and I've done bits of the B2, but I'm by no stretch of the imagination perfect in the language. Hello Richard, how's it going? Good to see you. Good to see you too, Rasmus. Nice to see you. Maybe because mosquitoes in places where languages are spoken. Yeah, maybe it is. I'm guessing you mean with Swahili, with the sort of insecticide. This is the thing I think with Duolingo. Let's say, for example, you're learning Swahili in the Balkans, and you learn the word for mosquito net and whatever else. And whilst they are important when you're there, if you're not there and you're not going there for a while, they're words that you can wait to learn a little bit later, I think. But yeah, maybe that's why they've done it on kind of a what's important in the country. And when it's been written with those kinds of ideas in mind. So this is why Duolingo Stories is better than Duolingo Tree, because you don't learn the useless words on Duolingo Stories. Yeah, a few people have mentioned the Duolingo Stories. They don't think they exist for Swahili. I have come across Swahili Pod 101, and I'm planning to listen to that a little bit as well, so that I can sort of hear some Swahili. I think that might be quite cool. It does seem to be Kenyan speakers because they use the Kenyan flag on the app, but I don't think that really makes a huge difference. I think Swahili is a pretty good lingua franca, so yeah, I don't really worry about the dialects or different speakers or accents at the moment. I'm not at the stage where it's really going to make much of a difference to my Swahili, I don't think. What are your top tips for getting the most out of Duolingo? I'm waiting for the release of Norwegian course. Duolingo Norwegian course. Oh, Norwegian course on Speakly, sorry. But till then, I use Duolingo. The best thing to do is to use the words that you learn and try and actively use them. So my top tip for any language app or book or course or whatever, if your goal is to speak, then you need to speak. So if you don't speak, you put 0 in and you get 0 out. If you speak, you put 1 in, you get 1 out. And this is kind of how it works. I mean, if you're not doing anything, you're not going to get anything from it. So my goal always is to read and listen and practice as much as possible, so that I'm getting the experience of using the language in an active way and using it with a person. So I mean, every week I do put a link in, and I will just highlight it again. There's a link that I put in from the Polyglot conference with italki, and you can put my name in, Richard, at the checkout, and you can get $15 for free. So feel free to do that, and try a teacher, try a couple of teachers, and find somebody you can practice with. You may even find language partners. I mean, I know there are language partner apps and things out there, but I find that with a teacher, particularly for me with a busy lifestyle where I have kind of a lot, don't have that much free time, I don't have the time to be exchanging languages with somebody, teaching someone. I don't particularly like teaching people English either, even though I speak English. It's not something that I particularly want to do with my time. And that's mainly what people would want to learn from me, is English. So I don't really want to do exchanges of English for other languages. That's not what I want. So I prefer to have a teacher or someone I pay for their time and for their energy and for their enthusiasm and for me murdering their languages in front of them. I really enjoy practicing in that way, and I definitely recommend doing that kind of thing, because that's sort of where the joy is. That's where you get the instant feedback, the instant gratification, the instant, euphoric feeling of I'm moving forward with this. But pay very close attention to the words you're using and remember what you've been doing recently and try and incorporate them into those conversations as much as possible. So that's what I would say with the Duolingo. With the things you're doing when the Norwegian course is released on Speakly, I would say make notes of the types of dialogues or situations that you have. Read them out with your language partner or teacher. Practice the pronunciation. Swap roles. Do both sides of the dialogue together. Practice using it. Then practice ad-libbing. Taking out words, putting in different words that mean something to you, and manipulating the conversation. Use those as a tool to sort of to put together things that are meaningful to you. So I would definitely suggest doing things like that. Hope that helps. Let me see. Wouldn't an A1 level be technically .1 above on? Yeah, technically. So Sophie, the way they do it actually is, and this is what it threw me when I first saw it. So technically, yeah, you're absolutely right. A0.1, right? But that's not how they do it. Strangely, what they do is, if you get a certificate, and I have these certificates at home in different places. When we did sort of midterm exams in Turkish, we got an A1.1 certificate, and then you work towards the A1.2 course, and that gives you the full A1. How that works, what the logic is, I don't know, but that's how they do it, and that's how this isn't just me making this up. This is kind of language schools across the world that have these things. They never start with A0. They always say A1.1 and A1.2 and B1.1 and B1.2, etc., etc., etc. This is how they build it up. And so when you've done the two parts of the A1 or the A2 or the B1 or the B2, then you get the full B1 or B2 or whatever it is you're doing. But yeah, I know what you mean. It doesn't make much sense. Duolingo Arabic really frustrates me. on how they use words when they teach you the alphabet. Yeah, okay. I mean, I've not used the Arabic one so much. Also, it might be a bit of a weird thing for me to do because I already can read the Arabic script. I studied Arabic many, many years ago, and I can read it still. In terms of I know what the letters are and how to pronounce them. I can't sit down and read Arabic and understand everything. That's not what I'm saying. Kind of like as many Muslims from countries where they don't speak Arabic as main language, they will go to a school where they learn to recite the Quran, and they will read out what is in the Quran, which has the vowels already written in with all of the all of the sort of the markers, so you know how to read it with the shadda and the sikun and all that kind of stuff. So they learn to read it, but they don't necessarily understand that they still need the translation into whichever language that they speak, whether that's Indonesian, which is obviously, I think, the most numerous Muslim country in terms of population of Muslims in the world, or whether that's my friends from the UK who grew up and speaking either English and then maybe another language. My friends in particular that went to that type of school spoke Bengali at home with their parents, but I mean British kids, right? But they spoke Bengali at home with their parents, and then they went to the mosque every week and would read the Quran in Arabic, but they'd have a translation in English that they would refer back to understand the meaning. But yeah, they had to recite it in Arabic. Anyway, what was I talking about? Yeah, so it would be a bit weird for me doing it because I can read kind of like my friends could read the Quran like that. I can read Arabic in that way. Yeah, so it might be a bit hard for me to test out and to be completely sort of in line with, because and also I know some Arabic words. It's not like I'm completely devoid of words. I'm so glad you're doing it and taking Duolingo. It's nice to have an insight into what it is there. I hope it will be released to Zulu and Xhosa. I would love to see that for Zulu and Xhosa. I think Duo is a great way to get into it. I think so too. I think it is. I see it as a thing for good generally. Anything that promotes language learning and is popularizing language learning, I think is a good thing. People speak very highly of it for Gaelic, for Scottish Gaelic, because it's done quite a lot for that. It's increased the amount of interest. It's increased the amount of people learning it. In Ireland, Irish as well is on there. I've heard mixed reviews of the Irish content. For the Scottish one, for example, Scottish Gaelic, I've heard some from people who speak Scottish Gaelic. I've heard some pretty favourable thoughts on it, particularly the voices they use. I understand that it's pretty authentic and good. So I've met people who have used the Welsh course and could say quite a lot of things in Welsh after completing the tree. So I'm not going to be sort of saying bad things about Duolingo, and ideal it isn't, no, but terrible it also is not. It's really not that bad. Yeah. Is there a difference between Tanzanian Swahili and Kenyan Swahili? I guess there will be some sort of difference in terms of pronunciation, but I've not got far enough into it to comment too much. But I would be surprised if there were no differences in terms of like how people speak Swahili and use it in Kenya and Tanzania, and then you've got it spoken in many other countries as well. But I would be surprised if there was. And I understood. Actually, I was at a talk yesterday. An African-led talk on African languages, and one of the speakers, one of the people who was speaking, was a Swahili speaker, and that person said that it's a good lingua franca, and they can hear that people are from different parts of the Swahili-speaking world, in terms of different countries around, but that doesn't make any difference. That was kind of the message that I understood from that. The biggest challenge of learning Norwegian would be the tendency to pronounce Danish. Yeah, as I know Danish, okay, to a high level and accommodations. Yeah. How about to keep these languages separate? This is a challenge, Erasmus. This is a challenge. So Definitely don't learn to speak like someone from that speaks of, like, maybe, I don't know, Bergen, Stavanger or somewhere, because that's going to be a bit closer for the pronunciation for you to the Danish. It feels when I hear it and when it's in my throat, feels closer. Whereas kind of a sort of the Oslo type speech is much more sort of much more typically what we think of as this sort of melody of bokmål when we hear it spoken. So I would definitely focus on a pronunciation that is very different from what you use for Danish, is the first thing. And then the second thing would be to practice both back to back if you can, and see how it goes, because that's the key. Is if you can start learning to swap or change, or learn, if for example that isn't your thing, it will give you two options. First of all, you could either practice and get better at it, or you can learn that this is really not working. I've been doing it for a year and I'm still mixing them up when I speak them back to back. There are people who speak languages, sometimes many languages, sometimes they speak both languages very well, but when they have to speak them back to back, there's like a crash and it doesn't work. So it's worth trying it out. I have met somebody who was just unable to learn one of the languages that was similar to their own, and that was somebody from Galicia, absolutely desperate to learn Portuguese. When I first heard them speaking I thought was Portuguese when I first started. It sounded really fluent, instant communication with the teacher. It sounded great. And as the time went on, my Portuguese improved, and their Portuguese was kind of, I realized that it wasn't Portuguese, it was Galician. And at the end of 2 years of study, the class was speaking Portuguese, and this person was still speaking Galician. Make of it what you will. Their understanding of Portuguese was great, and there are indeed people who, who will say they're so similar, or maybe too similar, to learn them both in a very authentic way as two separate languages. There are people that will manage it and do it. There are people who will have parents who are Galician speakers and Portuguese speakers and can swap very easily and know the differences immediately. There are people who can make, and they sound quite, if I hear Galician, I can hear it's not Portuguese. Now, of course, having learned Portuguese, it doesn't sound like Portuguese to me. It sounds like Galician, but it's still, it can sometimes be quite challenging, and sometimes even almost impossible. I don't know how much effort she made outside of class though either, so could have been an issue with that as well. Good to see you too. Thank you for the nice comments. I really appreciate it. I love that Duolingo has a vocabulary list for Norwegian and tips unlike other languages. I've studied Duolingo, however, I'm struggling to find what's this one? Osgood Dictionary, okay, for Norwegian. Any tips? Norwegian Dictionary. I'm not sure. Don't think I've not got a Norwegian dictionary myself. I have to be honest, I don't. I had one for Swedish at university, but I tend not to use. There's got to be an online dictionary. I can't recommend one off the top of my head. I didn't consider that it's normal to part of that Arabic pedagogy to teach reading way before comprehension like that. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you're Muslim, and many of my friends growing up were Muslim, it was very common for my friends to go to the mosque and to learn to read Arabic, and they had no clue what they were saying. The only way that they could understand what they were saying was if they looked at the translation, and the odd word, maybe. That's basically it. The Celtic languages, gosh, they're fascinating. Yeah, they are. That's my heritage, so it's kind of it's quite close to me. The Celtic languages. I'll probably never manage to learn any of them, but you've just inspired me to translate a sentence into Cernoec. Just wonder how correct it is. Wow, have a go, and I'll see if I understand it. I may or may not. Can't promise you, but have a go. Which language is Swahili most similar to? I don't know. It's a Bantu language, so I understood when I was in Zimbabwe, in the very north of Zimbabwe, actually Victoria Falls, and I was speaking to some of the people that worked where I was staying, and this one guy that I was talking to, he spoke like 5 languages. It's like insane. He spoke like local languages. He spoke like Shona, and he spoke what else did he speak? He said he could understand some Swahili tourists that came, some Swahili speaking tourists that came once from Kenya, I think he said. And he said from his knowledge of Bantu languages, he could understand not everything, but it wasn't completely alien to him. He understood quite a lot of words, but I don't know which one it's similar, most similar to. Okay, I'm seeing here, it's similar to any Bantu language. I speak Kiswahili, so it's similar to any Bantu language. Okay, that's interesting to know. Okay, so you can understand several languages. I'm reading this from a comment from somebody who speaks it. Thank you, Morrison. So the languages from the Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, East Africa languages, and other languages in Southern Africa. Yeah, okay. That may make sense, right? I mean, Bantu languages, I did understand that there were quite a lot of things in common. It's a bit like some languages that you don't realize are related and are related. And when you go to Africa and you hear these stories, it's quite interesting. I love it because my knowledge of African languages is like it's really not that great. But I loved listening to people and learning from them. So thank you so much for adding that comment so that I could read it out for everyone else. I appreciate you doing that. We can all learn new things, right? It's really cool. How many hours per day do you spend learning languages? Quite a lot. I mean, a couple of 2 or 3 hours a day. It's like active study, maybe. Possibly. It's difficult to say. It depends on the languages I'm learning as well, because some languages are similar, and it depends how quickly I want to learn them. So for Swahili now, it was just an hour a day for a month. And then for Estonian in the summer, I thought 4 hours a day of Estonian studies, and then I did 3 hours a day in the second month, and I covered quite a lot of ground. So that doing it with that intensity took me to around about an A2 level. Ish. It's not a definite A2 level, but it's ish. In terms of words I'd covered, would be around that because it was around about 1,500 or so words at that time. So, I'm loving your app, Speakly. It's not my app. I have to say, Speakly is not my app. I had a couple of comments like that about my app, Speakly. You've recommended it to all the students. Wow, thank you very much. I mean, I'm saying thank you on behalf of the people who developed and work at Speakly. I don't work for Speakly. I just tried their app and really enjoyed it. And I actually recommended it to somebody I was helping with German, and they found it really useful and as well. So that's why I felt quite happy recommending it to people, because I saw it working with people. And it depends how you use it, and depends how often you use it. I mean, but I found it was pretty useful to get words that you would see quite commonly in the languages, which is really cool. Okay. It's so true what you're saying. I passed a Chinese HSK, and I can't speak that. Will cause I never practice. Yeah, because it's completely true. I totally get that. I meet people who study languages and sort of pass exams and things. It doesn't necessarily mean you speak them if you pass the exam. So you can learn to pass an exam. You can learn to read. You can learn to speak. You can learn to read or write, whatever it is. But you don't necessarily, they're not always connected. So I've met people who can read a language pretty well, but they can't speak it. I've met people who have passed exams in languages, but then if you ask them to write anything or to say anything, they don't really know it to do that. And this is because there are active and passive skills. So there we go. It's I've just seen a recommendation for Norwegian dictionary, ordbook.n ordbokene. Is that for a recommendation? No, maybe not actually. Sorry. May not. No. I thought I saw a .no and it's not. Sorry about that. Let me see. Hola Richo, ¿cómo estás? Estoy muy bien, gracias. Sí, aquí estudiando, hablando de lo que me gusta mucho, son los idiomas, ¿no? Y eso, muchas gracias. A ver, let's see. A ver, ¿qué tenemos ahora? Noun classes challenging, yes. Learning Kiswahili since 2019 and still confused about Ngeli. Yeah, I've got to be honest. I can see how that's a real sticking point for Swahili. Sometimes I'm kind of guessing, and even with simple, what I think should be more simple and straightforward things, I'm still like the possessive pronouns. So sometimes I'm writing the wrong thing, for example, and not knowing whether it's zangu, changu, wangu, langu for my, sorry. So I get it a little bit. Speak Turkish, okay. Bir şey Türkçe yazabilirsin değil mi? Ama sadece bilmiyorum. I have no idea what to say. When people say speak a language in another language, it's always very difficult to know what to say, except for, I don't know. Bilmiyorum. Bir şey Türkçe'de konuşabilirim ama yani hiç çok ilginç değil mi? Çünkü hiçbir sorun yok ve hiçbir şey yok ve bu yüzden reaksiyon yok. Sadece İngilizce ve ya da birkaç şey Türkçe diyebilirim ama fazla yok değil mi? Yes, efendim means your highness in Turkish. People use constantly. Yeah, efendim. We use efendim here as well, so we use it in Macedonian too, efendim. How do you maintain all languages? So I speak a lot of them at home or where I live, around me in the communities. Normally, when COVID's not around, and I usually travel a little bit too. But with COVID, it's been a bit different, a lot online. And then for my work, I often use languages too. So that's kind of how I maintain the ones that I have. And it's also how I decide which languages to focus on, because there's no point trying to take a language to us like this. People talk about, why don't you study this language to a C2 level or even a B2 level? If you're not speaking it and you have to spend a lot of time and effort just to come into contact with the language, it's kind of a bit pointless, really, because there are so many languages that I'm interested in, and if it's so much work that I almost can't get my other things done, it needs to be something I can use naturally. So, I mean, realistically, one of the languages that I should work on is actually Romani, because I could use Romani quite a lot if I improved it. My Romani at the moment is not very good. I've studied it a little bit, but it's not very good. And the bit that I do know, I do use. And the people I know who speak it, particularly in Skopje, will speak to me and greet me in Romani, and it's very, very sweet. It's very rewarding, and I love the language. So I would potentially like to go back to Romani and study it properly. See about Duolingo. Did you get through all the stars at each section? Topic, or just go through and you feel like, no, I actually went through. So the strategy I used for Duolingo, I felt that this whole mastery, legendary, they call it, right? So you'll see some of them are broken now, but on Duolingo, I actually went through and got mastery for different topics, because I don't feel, I mean, if you get it to gold, this gold color here, you do know it fairly well. But when you get to mastery, you do know it pretty well, to be fair. So I that's kind of the principle I've been working on. I've not been trying to move ahead just by getting like one thing, like just the crown, and then moving forward. I've actually really spent time trying to master the vocabulary at each stage. I find it sticks better, and also I can't really manage too much vocabulary all at once. For me, if you were to do a language that's not related to languages you speak, like Swahili, if you were to do this and just get this kind of 1 crown, right, and move forward each time it kept opening up, and you went through to get 1 crown, 1 crown, 1 crown, 1 crown. I don't think you'd have a very good knowledge of Swahili or remember the words. And the reason I say that is because it would be the equivalent of going to a class, writing down every single word that you hear, even the words that are not relevant to you in your life, at the beginning of studying the language, and then never looking at the words again. And that to me is actually one of the most impractical ways of studying a language. So one of my pet hates in language learning is when you go to a class and the students, particularly the students, will do this to the teacher, and the teacher will often feel pressed to give all the vocabulary they need and almost act like a walking dictionary of the language, which is a nonsense. And they'll say, but how do you say engineer? How do you say farmer? How do you say nurse? How do you say doctor? How do you say... They go through every single possible profession. Now, you may only need about 5 professions to be able to communicate about your family and about the people you know and care about. You don't need to know from the very first time you look at all the professions. You don't need to know them all at once. And you don't need to know them all at an A1.1 level, where I am now with Swahili, roughly. So yes, there are unuseful vocabulary words in here, and I'd like to skip them, but there are not that many that it makes it problematic to move forward. There are also quite a lot of useful words that if I were to just skip through too quickly, I wouldn't get the useful words either. I'd end up not having anything. And so there's kind of a weird equilibrium, I think, for this. So yeah, but it's a very good question. I really like that question. Swahili sounds so cool. It does. Swahili is amazing. I wonder how hard it is to find resources. Not actually that hard. There are quite a lot of things. So there was an old Teach Yourself book that I had and still have at home. There's a colloquial book that I have. There's an Asimil book as well. There are a couple of university books that you can get for Swahili. They've got Swahili Pod 101, which you can use. There are quite a few things actually for Swahili. It's not too bad at all. One of the things I would like to do is, because I told you I love Botswana, I would actually love to learn Tswana. It's a language that I started trying to learn bits of Tswana when I was there, trying to understand what the names of the roads were. I was in Kasane, which is in the kind of the north, near to, if you know the geography of that part of the world, it's near to Victoria Falls, so you can get quite easily over to Kasane, and it's where the safaris as well. It's on the Zambezi River. It's absolutely wonderful. But I started trying to learn the different words for things, and I bought some books on Tswana, and I'd love to learn. Let me see. Yeah, we love homogeneous languages because it's quick to acquire fluency in them. Yeah, there is something about that. There's something quite nice about learning languages that are similar, because it gives you that feeling of learning a language quickly. It can do 2 things. First of all, it can make you feel very confident very quickly. And so because you already know a lot of vocabulary, you can make quite quick progress in it. But what it also does is, because you make quite quick progress in that language, when you come to a language that's very different, like Swahili or another language, you almost feel demotivated because it doesn't go so quickly, and you're like, what's happening? Am I bad? No, you're not bad at the language. It's just that it takes time. This is kind of a normal new language. It takes time to get good at it and to learn the words and stuff. So yeah, you're all doing well. You're all going to be moving forwards, which is the important thing. My first intro to Swahili was The Lion King. Yeah, I love that. I love that there's so many words as well. I did a tweet because there are words that I already knew about Swahili from The Lion King, actually. Simba, obviously. Rafiki. Rafiki is a friend in Swahili. Simba is obviously a lion. So there were quite a lot of things like that that I already knew. Not too many. Hakuna Matata. It was quite fun understanding the grammar behind Hakuna Matata and what it means. I quite liked that part of the learning process because you know this phrase for like years and years and years, and then you learn what it means and break it down, and it makes sense to you, right? And you can manipulate it, and that's quite cool. I'll try and answer a couple more questions, and then I will need to disappear, unfortunately. I have a few more emails to write and things to get sorted before tomorrow. Can you learn a lot with music? You can learn a fair bit with music. It depends on how you're using it. But yeah, I mean, music I find to be quite a nice thing to do. It gets you into the language and energized. Sometimes you've got to be careful that it's not lyrics that don't represent the way people normally speak. Like, for example, I would hate to think that somebody learned English via, I don't know, US rap music, for example. It's not how we speak. In like say in a polite way sometimes, and sometimes it's not the standard grammar that you'd see on an assessment or in a book or anything like that. They're useful in their own right because it's a way of expression. So it's not that it's not a bad thing, but as a learner of a language, you typically learn the standard language first so that you have access to more materials. And also sometimes they will use words that are either very poetic, which you wouldn't necessarily hear in a conversation. Sometimes they would be very, very slangy that you wouldn't be able to use in a conversation. Sometimes may even be inappropriate. If you're taking English, my example of rap music in English, sometimes it may even be inappropriate words that you wouldn't want to use in polite company, that sound like they're very commonly used, but actually are not. So yes, I would definitely take the advice of people who speak the language on which music to listen to, but it can be very useful. I used it a lot at university for Italian. I learned a lot of Italian songs. And one of the things with Italian music, for example, that if you do use Italian music, so I at the time when I was studying, I used Eros Ramazzotti, Laura Pausini, Neck. They were the main ones I had, and they'll use, for example, they'll use some flowery language that you won't necessarily hear, but also they will use some verb forms that they don't use in common speech, like fu will be used in. Fu un brivido, sì, is one of the lines and lyrics in one of Eros Ramazzotti's songs. It's actually from Dove c'è musica, where is the music? And you don't use that type of verbal construction in spoken Italian. It's like Italian's kind of in this weird. If you look at Italian, French, and Spanish still uses the preterite. This sort of different form, right? French doesn't, and it only uses it in written language. You don't use it ever in spoken language, pretty much. And with Italian, it's kind of some parts of Italy will use some elements of it, but the standard Italian generally you don't. So it's quite a fun thing to ask actually. But yeah. Será sono grabados de diumenge. Ah, gracias, Teres. I love it. I actually quite like some rap music, just to be a bit weird. There are some in German that I particularly like. There was one, ARD, ZDF, C1A, and they go through all of these sort of acronyms in German that are very well known in German. And if you want to look up the song, it's called MFG mit freundlichen Grüßen, and that's kind of the chorus. MFG mit freundlichen Grüßen. Die Welt liegt unter Füßen, wir stehen drauf, wir gehen drauf für irgendwas Schattenrauch. Before fire, feine Liebe auf. And this is kind of how the song goes. But yeah, it's been a while since I've heard that song, but it kind of still sticks in my mind. But it's very clever the way it's been put together because it uses all of these acronyms in German that are very well known. And if you're learning German, you do need to know a lot of them because they're very, they're very sort of in the popular cultural meanings as well as sort of in the language. Are you able to speak Japanese? Not really. I can say bits and bobs in Japanese. You've bought a lifetime to Speakly for Finnish. Maybe I'm questioning it. Okay. It depends how you're using it, Marcus. So I would recommend not racing through it too quickly. I would recommend taking screenshots and writing things out. I would recommend using what they say as well to go back and to listen to things over and over again. I would recommend taking their advice, but also doing those additional things too. Yoga Bliss, Lance, nice to see you. Thank you for joining. Let me see. Okay, I'm just going to see if I can answer every question here. Have I ever studied Finnish? Yes, I have studied Finnish. I studied it for kind of like a few months for a project to go to Finland, and I went to Finland and spent a couple of months there studying at the university in Helsinki. I studied with Suomen Mestari, and then I studied, that was the book we used at the university too. I studied the first level on my own, and then I studied the second and half of the third level with the university at the university in Helsinki, and then I used it on the streets with people in Finland. But my Finnish is not very good now. I still understand what I learned, but I can't speak it. Doing the Estonian actually reminded me of my Finnish, and so it's helped me to bring a lot back. I recommend that dictionary. Okay. Which dictionary is that? Was that the Ordbookina? Ordbookina. Is that .no? Yeah, for sure. Feel free to recommend the dictionary if you see it in the chat. Japanese, no. I'm wondering if that language is on your list. So I've studied Japanese a couple of times because we did the Polyglot conference in Fukuoka. So I have studied Japanese. I took lessons. I studied at a university in Sweden. So I only did a semester of Japanese, though. I didn't do much, and the semester was enough to cover hiragana, katakana, and then some basic kanji. And then we did, but it was very basic, kind of like A1-ish, maybe at the end, A1-ish level. My Japanese is definitely, I don't feel like it's even A1 level or even A1.1 at the moment. But it's funny, when I see things, I do sometimes understand still, but it's not amazing at all. Definitely something I want to go back to. That was in fact my plan before COVID hit, was to go back and revise my Japanese, revise my Chinese, my Mandarin, and then to start Korean. That was my plan, and then COVID. So I ended up just starting with the Korean. I did the Korean for a year, and I got used to a lot of Korean. But then even that, I scaled it right back because I knew I wasn't going to be going anywhere for a while. Do you like assimil, and do you use the French version when you learn target language? Using French assimil or translate from French into your target language? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I studied in France as well, so I'm very used to studying languages through French. So when I was at university in France, I studied Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese through French, and I had to do interpreting from Spanish to French and French back to Spanish. So I'm quite used to doing that. So yeah, using assimil is not a problem in that way. And yes, I do like assimil. And how do you compare assimil and Duolingo? Assimil's more of a serious course, I guess. I mean, and Duolingo is kind of like a game, so I don't think that they occupy the same space. So for me, assimil would be something you'd go through, like Professor Arguelles talks about. He made a great video a few days ago about how to use assimil, how he uses it. But then Duolingo would be something you kind of do as a fun thing at the side, if that makes sense. It wouldn't be the main way of studying it for me. Not like it, yeah, if that makes sense. Richard, what do you think of Amharic? Amharic, I think it looks brilliant. It's a language that actually one of my friends grew up speaking. Another one of my friends is originally from Ethiopia, but doesn't speak Amharic. And I would definitely like to learn some Amharic in the future. Obviously, with it being a Semitic language, there would be some similarities to some of the, I guess, the structures that I've seen in Hebrew and in Arabic, and in Maltese. But I don't speak it in any way at all at the moment. Hopefully, who knows, in the future. Oh wow, my mum lived in Kasane for several years and I visited her there. Oh really? Wow. Okay. Yeah, Kasane is lovely. I love it. It's really, really nice. The people are so friendly. Saludos desde México. Hola, saludos. ¿Qué tal? A ver, okay, let me see. I'm gonna have to jump off now. I think I've got most of, yeah, keeping up the kanji is crazy. I agree. I think I've got most of the questions, so hopefully I got the question that was important to you. And if I didn't, next time, feel free to write your question or your message. I'm very happy to do that. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, and all that kind of nice stuff, and comment. You know, to reach more people, to answer questions about languages, and to get the answers that are important to you. You know, I really, without you, I'm just talking to no one. So I'm very happy if I can help, and if you find this useful, please do feel free to support by giving a follow, giving a like, and I don't spam you, so I'm not one of the, I don't spam you and I won't spam you. I hope that I will only ever give you something that's useful for your language learning. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely day or evening or morning, wherever you are in the world, and all the best for your language learning. And I look forward to speaking to you again next week, same time, same place. See you next week. Take care. Bye bye.